On tonight, we will look at Romans chapter 11, verses 33 and 34. There is a person whose name you may not be familiar with, but you are more than likely familiar with some of his work, and that is Charles A. Tinley. He was a Methodist preacher who lived in the very early part of the last century, and he composed many songs that we are familiar with. Songs such as Take Your Burden to the Lord and Leave It There. Another song, I'll Overcome Someday, which is where We Shall Overcome derives its inspiration. But there's a song that he composed that I have always found to be interesting, not so much for how the song sounds, but what the song says. It's the song called When the Morning Comes. Some people call it Trials Dark on Every Hand, but the correct name of the song is When the Morning Comes. Perhaps people remember the line that says, trials dark on every hand, and we cannot understand all the ways that God would lead us to that blessed promised land. But he'll guide us with his eye, and we'll follow till we die. We will understand it better by and by. That song, and in particular, those few lines, speak so much truth to our reality in that we do not always understand. And as we have been talking this week about peace, one of the things that gets in the way of our ability to have peace is when we are facing those dark trials and those times in which we do not understand. The Bible teaches us in Romans chapter 11, verses 33 and 34, about the power of our God, and in particular, his inexhaustible knowledge and wisdom. The Bible says, "Oh, the depths of the riches, both of the wisdom and the knowledge of God. How unsearchable are his judgments, and his ways past finding out. For who have known the mind of the Lord, or who has been his counselor?" Again, we see in these two verses a tremendous insight to the inexhaustible riches of God's wisdom, his knowledge. So that begs the question, why does God not allow us to know more? And why are we so limited? Well, we have to keep in mind that he's God and we're not. That right there is a very simple but profound explanation as to why we are so often confused, why we have these times in which we have dark trials. If we were God and understood what God understands, then we would not have a need for him. I mean, think about it. We, mankind, could not keep a simple command in the Garden of Eden to not eat from the forbidden fruit. And if man could not keep up with that, can you only imagine if we had more knowledge, more insight, how much more corrupt we would be because of misusage of what God has given to us to understand and be enlightened on. In our lives, we often face three things that overwhelm us. We have difficult times. Those difficult times are those times in which we can truly say, trials dark on every hand. Those difficult times are burdens that we bear, choices that we must make, alienation that we feel, and all of the other negatives that come with dark times. Then we experience discouragement. Discouragement, there's nothing that takes the wind out of your sails like discouragement. And when you get discouraged, you just lose energy and the wherewithal to press on. And we often find ourselves in times where we have to make detours. Why doesn't God give us a straighter path? Why doesn't He allow things to work the way we think they should work? Why do we have to take the long route when we perceive there to be a shortcut? Have you ever thought about in those moments where we're confused about the detours of life, about ancient Israelites? Do you know that the path that they took to the promised land was actually a longer route? The Red Sea route was not the shortest path. It was actually the longer path. Why did God allow them to go on the longer path? Because had they taken the more direct path, the Bible reveals that they would have run into enemy territory with the Amalekites. And so as opposed to allowing them to be overwhelmed by people, God sent them on a longer path. See, sometimes God allows you to avoid some things, and you have to make detours in life because you don't always know what God is keeping from you. So often we think about what we feel we're missing, and only God in His inexhaustible wisdom and knowledge knows what's on the other path. Here it is, the Israelites were afraid of water, and God was keeping them from enemies. Water wasn't the problem. The Amalekites were the real problem. So when we face those detours, maybe we need to think about why God allows us to go on such detours. We never know what He's keeping from us. But in these times of difficulty and discouragement and detours, we desire comfort, we desire clarity, and we want closure. We want comfort because we have been unsettled, we're anxious, we're frustrated, we're aggravated, and we would just desire, if nothing else, comfort. Unfortunately, we can't write a check for it, and we can't charge it on our American Express, Visa, MasterCard, or Discover. Then we want clarity. We want to question God, not in the sense of questioning His right to be God and do what He does, but we just really like to understand why. If we could just understand why, a little clarity would help us out. And then there's that one thing that we really want is closure. We want to be done with it. We want to be through. We want to be over it. We want it to no longer hurt and no longer impact our lives. So as we see all of these things about the riches of God's wisdom and understanding, why doesn't He allow us more comfort, more clarity, and more closure in those times of difficulty, discouragement, and even detours? You have to understand that there are limitations on our understanding and wisdom. There are at least 4 reasons why we are limited and cannot understand. Number 1, we are human, so we do not have the capacity to understand all things. Number 2, because of our emotions. We get so clouded in how we feel that our ability to think and process is hindered. I challenge you to think about your difficulties, your discouragements, and your detours. Many times you get more into how you feel and less in thinking critically and thinking logically. 3, we have to be careful about our counselors. That is, those people who are in our head, whispering and talking and advising us. We can easily seek counsel of people, and we miss the counsel of God. And number 4, we don't always understand, not only because we're human, not only because of emotions, not only because of our quote-unquote counselors, but our maturity level. See, when the song says we will understand it better by and by, that's a nod to understanding that life provides clarity and even closure as you develop, as you mature. as you process and gain a perspective. So what I'd like to encourage you to do is to take comfort in the faith that you have in God, knowing that that's where your comfort comes from. Your comfort does not come from erasing difficulties or discouragement or detours, but it's comfort that the faith in God will see you through. You get clarity by following God and knows that He will lead you according to His purpose and His plans. And you get closure in your fellowship with God because He promises He'll never leave you nor forsake you. He's always with us, everywhere, at every time. So the next time you think the trials are dark on every hand, just remember we serve a God whose inexhaustible understanding, wisdom, and knowledge is sufficient. And as long as we trust in Him, we know that we will understand it better by and by. This is another installment of A Few Minutes with the Minister.